Good evening. Is this working? Good evening. My name is Jeff Thielman, and I am the chairperson of the Arlington High School Building Committee, and we welcome you to our 8th public forum. We have two goals this evening. First, we will report on where we are in the planning of the new high school, including the role the education vision plays in the plan, and plans for the exterior design, the site, and the building's sustainability. At the end of this segment, we will take 15 minutes of questions on these topics. In the second segment, we will talk about the costs of the project, including answers to questions that have arisen comparing Arlington High School to other projects in the state, work we have done analyzing whether it makes sense to move the district offices and or the Mononamy Preschool to the Parmenter Building in Jason Heights, and the value engineering or cost-cutting process we have undertaken. At the end of this part of the presentation, we will take questions on cost as well as any other issues presented earlier in the evening. Before we get started, I'd like all the members of the building committee to stand up and just be recognized. So some members of the building committee are here this evening, and if you have questions at the end of the forum and you don't get a chance to ask your question, you can ask members of the committee. I want to begin by talking about the Arlington High School facility. The facility serves 1,400 students and is one of the highest performing high schools in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. In 2018, U.S. News and World Report ranked our high school number 9 in the Commonwealth. And over the years, AHS has earned multiple gold and silver medals from U.S. News. However, the academic achievements of our students and the excellent teaching that takes place in the building does not tell the whole story. In 2013, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, known as NEASC, placed Arlington High School on warning status because of inadequate and outdated classrooms, science labs, technology, and infrastructure, which impact the overall learning environment. At our forums, you have heard faculty and staff members talk about the physical challenges and limits of the building. And if you have ever listened to a group of high school students chat about the building, you will get an even more candid and colorful picture of the place. Arlington High School is a jumble of buildings constructed between 1914 and 1964, which has resulted in a confusing and inefficient layout with more than 1.5 miles of hallways to navigate and maintain. In the mid-1970s, Arlington's voters rejected a plan to build a new high school for about $19 million. The plan included a hockey rink, indoor tennis courts, and a pool. As a result of that defeat, in 1981, the town had to allocate funds from its capital budget to make repairs to Fusco and Column House, Low Auditorium, and the Blue Gym, and in that same year, the town built the Red Gym. In the spring of 2018, 37 years after those repairs were made, our architectural firm, HMFH, certified that it was not feasible to only renovate the current facility without doing an addition because the building could not accommodate enrollment growth. The building is old, tired, and does not work as a modern high school, especially one that strives to deliver high-quality education to students. The challenged physical state of the building is why the Massachusetts School Building Authority is interested in helping Arlington's taxpayers finance a new school. Though our responsibility is to build a high school, AHS plays an important role for nearly everyone in town. The building is the home of the Mononamy Preschool with just under 100 children. State law requires Arlington to have a public preschool and to offer services to children with learning disabilities beginning at age 3. In addition to the preschool, AHS houses part of the Lab Collaborative, which is a partnership with Lexington, Burlington, Bedford, and Belmont to provide holistic special education services to children. Arlington Community Education's offices reside in the facility as well because of the program's extensive use of the building nearly every night of the week. The high school building is also home to several townside services, including the comptroller, information technology, payroll, and facilities departments. These town offices moved to AHS when the enrollment declined in the 1980s and 1990s. Finally, the school district offices are currently located at Arlington High School. So it is important to think about AHS as a building that serves the entire community. We are building on a compact and complicated site. The high school campus is a little more than 22 acres, while the MSBA target is that a high school should ideally be located on a property with a minimum of 25 acres. We are doing everything we can to make sure there are enough fields for athletics and as much parking as possible, while maximizing green space on the site. Our architectural team will talk in a few minutes about this. At the same time that we are constructing a new high school, the town is rebuilding the offices of the Department of Public Works, or DPW, which is located to the west of Arlington High School. We are coordinating with the DPW project to develop comprehensive parking and traffic solutions, and we plan to place some town offices currently at AHS in the expanded DPW facility. Let me take a few moments to update everyone on the process we have undertaken to rebuild our high school. In April of 2015, the town of Arlington submitted a statement of interest, or SOI, to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, indicating that we wanted to partner with the state to study the feasibility of rebuilding AHS. In May of 2016, the MSBA invited the town into the eligibility period, which marked the formal beginning of our effort to rebuild Arlington High School with state money. By inviting Arlington into its process, the MSBA agreed with the New England Association of Schools and Colleges that Arlington High School had serious infrastructure issues. In late 2016, in accordance with MSBA rules, the town formed the High School Building Committee. For more than 2 years, we have been meeting about twice a month and also holding hearings, conducting surveys, meeting with people at town events, and making decisions about the future of the school. A critical step in rebuilding the high school is determining the building's design enrollment. Enrollment, more than any other factor, impacts the size and ultimately the cost of the school. In 2016 and 17, we had a series of meetings with the MSBA and ultimately agreed to a design enrollment of 1,755 students. This figure informs the number of homerooms we will have in the school, but is not a cap on the number of students we can have in the building. The design is flexible enough to have educational programming for more than 1,755 students. The building committee takes very seriously our responsibility to construct a school that will accommodate the town's rapidly rising enrollment. That is why we are reluctant to reduce program space in any way. There was a time when enrollment in Arlington declined. As a result, in the 1980s and 1990s, the town closed several elementary schools. When I joined the school committee in 2003, there were approximately 4,300 students enrolled in Arlington's public schools. Today, there are more than 6,000 students in our system, including 584 kindergartners. We are projecting that our total enrollment will grow to 6,800 students in the next decade. Building Arlington High School right and building it big enough weighs heavily on the minds of the members of the building committee as we make decisions about this school. Throughout this process, we have been guided by an educational plan and division developed by Arlington High School Principal Dr. Matt Jenger, his staff, district leadership, and community members. At this time, I want to call Dr. Jenger to the podium to explain some aspects of the plan that are exciting to faculty, staff, and students.
Thank you all for coming. So going back to Mr. Thielman's timeline, in 2014, as we began looking at the statement of interest, and as the faculty looked forward to the expectation that at some point in the not-too-distant future, we'd begin a project, our faculty began a process of visioning and studying internally Departments went out and visited schools in the area, new buildings, looked at the sorts of things that were going on there, as well as reflecting on their educational process to think about what was limiting them, the way they wanted to be teaching in the future, and the sorts of facilities they would need. After we got accepted into the process, there was, as Mr. Thielman points out, a visioning process. We took the information from the faculty, and we had a committee of about 60 community members, faculty members, students, and other folks. And we got together over a 3-day period and went through a process of thinking about what was the educational vision for the school. If you look at the design for the school, it has a couple of sort of central pieces in terms of how we're thinking about what we're doing. One of them is flexibility. An awful lot of the time, people build new schools based on the new fad, and they're stuck with a school that 50 years from now is not the way they want to educate. So absolutely, we thought about having a flexible design. It's a design which allows us to do what we're doing well now and helps us to go into the things we want to do in the future. Central to this school is having a school that's welcoming, and a school where the students describe sort of with comfortable places, connections to the outside, indoor and outdoor spaces. When you come into the central building, you'll see the central commons. There's a central hallway. It's a large space, goes down to the cafeteria and up to the library learning commons. That's the heart for interdisciplinary work and collaborative work and hands-on learning in the school. In addition, right now Arlington has very strong academics, and we have a very strong academic departmental structure. So we want to keep that departmental structure alive. There are 2 academic wings. So one academic wing focuses on the humanities, languages, social studies, and world language and English. That's 4 things, but it's really 3. And then the other wing is STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. On the other side are 2 wings, a performing arts wing and an athletics wing. So what's nice about this structure is it provides a lot of freedom for the students as well as a lot of security and supervision. Students come together in the middle of the building where they are able to have a lot of agency and a lot of places to be, but it's very easy to supervise. The academic wings are places you go into, but they're not comprised of long hallways. They comprise small neighborhood areas where teachers can work together. There's overlap between the facilities, so if we want to, we can reorganize that into neighborhoods and interdisciplinary pods. But the expectation is as we go into the next year that we'll have 4 houses and that interdisciplinary structure. So we are very excited about that. And then last but not least, a major part of what we look now at education is digital technology and other forms of technology allow students to more actively be real creators of knowledge and things. So in every single one of those departmental spaces, we focus on there being some kind of makerspace, a space with specialized technology to allow the different departments to do the things they do in modern ways. And again, we've made those spaces flexible. They're large spaces that can be equipped in various different ways. So that's the vision we have going forward, and we're very excited about it. The hardest part at this point for me is it's like when you decided you're going to do your kitchen, but you're still in the old one. But the last piece to reassure people about is this. There is still excellent education going on in the school that we're in. We're going to be in this building probably for about 3 more years before we begin to move into any of the new facilities, and the teachers are doing excellent work there. Thank you. We'll have wider stairs.
So now I want to talk a little bit about the design decision before I bring up the architects. Those of you who have followed this process know that in June of 2018, we submitted a preferred design concept to the MSBA that called for a completely new high school. The plan we chose, known as Alternative 3A, calls for the new Arlington High School to be built in phases with no interruption to student learning or activities. Alternative 3A preserves 2/3 of the front lawn and converts parking lots to green spaces. We chose to build a new school because renovating part of the school and building an addition would have cost more money, would take 15 months longer to build, and would have caused AHS to operate for 2 years without a gym and for another 2 years without an auditorium. In August of 2018, the MSBA Board of Directors approved Alternative 3A, and we began the schematic design phase of the phase we're now in. During this phase, we are making decisions about the interior layout, the exterior look and feel, the location of town and school offices, parking, traffic flow, sustainability, and cost. We will receive revised cost estimates later this month, and in early February, we are scheduled to submit the total project budget and schematic design to the MSBA. At our last forum, we shared 3 different exterior schemes with the community and sought public input on those schemes. The committee directed the architectural team to develop Scheme A, a more traditional design, but to take into account some of the elements of the other 2 schemes. It is worth noting that in our community survey, Scheme A secured the most support from the residents of Arlington. At this time, I want to call on Melissa Green from the architectural firm HMFH to speak about the exterior design and the site plan, including parking.
I just wanted to take a quick minute to do a short overview of where we are today, and I wanted to start sort of from the inside of, oh, sorry. Hello? Is that better? Okay, I'm not used to microphones. I wanted to start sort of this overview from the inside looking then to the outside. So this you can see here is a Part T. It's a diagram of what we're proposing for the building. Like Dr. Janger said, you can see the 2 academic wings are in the orangish color, and that's the humanities and STEAM wing. And then on the other side, we are showing the athletics and performing arts, and that is, connected via a spine. And you know the next slide. This is a section of the spine, which is a slice that we take through the building. This is going from Mass Ave over here to the fields on the rear of the site. In this spine, this space becomes the central hub of the building, where the majority of the shared active spaces are either within the spine or adjacent to it. You can see as you start from the Mass Ave side, you can come into the main lobby space. This is a place for art display, public gathering. Above that space, you can see the D-Lab. That's a space, the debate and discourse lab. It has tiered seating, a lecture hall style space that can be used for intimate presentations or debates. Off of the spine, along this edge, you can see an entrance to the auditorium, the black box, and the gym. So these large, important public spaces are all connected into this spine. Above the whole spine, we're creating an idea of a green roof where students and teachers can go outside in the day and be on the roof to get sunlight and, do science experiments, whatever. The cafeteria at the rear of the space connects up through to the lobby by the creation of a large forum stair, which we picture as a place where the kids could be and hang out. And above that cafeteria space, we have the library. So the hearts of the quiet and the noisy hearts of the school are all within this main area. Next, I think 2 slides. So in the work of the exterior, we came up with 3 different options. This one was option A. It was a more traditional option. In this, we were proposing the historic reuse of the column house facade, and in that, we'd be recreating the brick piers because those would not move very well, but we would hopefully be reusing the actual wood columns from Column House. This is a more traditional academic and performing wings on either side. So the academic wing is the slightly taller wing there, and then the auditorium wing is closer to me here. There's a glass volume in front of the auditorium wing and behind the column so that you can see the transparency into the spine. And all of the options were really trying to have the spine and that excitement expressed through the front. So on Mass Ave, you can see that. If you want to go to the next slide. The column house, we were, placing that forward to try to create the idea of a forecourt on the site to give a place that's covered where the kids could gather. The D-Lab is above in that overhang space, and that would allow even more exterior gathering space. Next slide. In this section that we took, you can really see, the perspective is a little bit smushed, but in this you can really see the breadths of space that this forecourt could create where the kids could gather. And next option. In option B, we were trying to express the curved forms of the auditorium and the D-Lab on the facade. So you can see the auditorium is here and the D-Lab is there. This was sort of, these forms are trying to create a sense of tension and entry. The large entrance canopy that's connecting between those two was to protect kids from the elements and create a welcoming space for them to enter the school. This design and this concept also expressed the other important programs of the building, like the chorus seen over here and then the science seen there. Another idea in this scheme was that we were creating sort of the idea of bay windows on the academic wing. This was something that some of the teachers had said they would want, and it could create like a little pull-out space within the classrooms. If you want to go to the next slide. The underside of the auditorium, it can be opened up and it can be creating a bench for the kids to sit and gather outside. And this entrance piece was sort of one of our modern reinterpretations of colonnade and an entablature. So that was kind of the idea we were going with there, sort of modern interpretation. The next slide. In this section, you can see that by creating this more open facade, you're able to get more of a connection to Mass Ave and through the spine, which we thought was important. And the gathering spaces are more connected to the green spaces outside. Next. Option C is very similar in its expressions of forms as B. It was just a little bit of a different detailing that we went with. The canopy follows along the academic facade, goes up and over the D-Lab, and loops around to the back. So this was kind of creating a connectivity from the front and the back. The large canopy at the top was trying to create a civic presence, while the lower canopies coming down were to create the human scale as you entered. Next. This scheme also creates the covered bench area under the auditorium, again, very similar to what we had in option B for forms. One more. And then in this section, you could see without the large covering, it's an even more connecting spine to the Mass Ave side. And the underside of the D-Lab had a curve sort of formed to sort of bring down a human scale as you came in through the entrance. The committee, as Jeff said, has elected to proceed with option A, including some of the design options you've seen here in B and C. And the next, I think 2. Yeah, so then this is just an update on the site. As you can see, from Mass Ave to the Minuteman Bikeway and the fields, the spine connection is coming through the site and trying to lead you from Mass Ave to the existing stadium. At Mass Ave, we're trying to save as many of the mature trees as possible and recreate as much of the green space as we can. We're switching the softball and the baseball, and that allows us to get a regulation size for both of those fields, as well as 2 large practice fields that are really hard to read on this, but are sort of overlaid over those 2 fields. We're also creating a connection from the Minuteman Bikeway to the school along, you can see there's like a little beige line that loops in so you can get off the bikeway and get onto the site. Forms of the building are also being used to create student-centric spaces like the amphitheater seen on this side and then the large learning courtyard on the other side. The 2-way drive loop around the perimeter of the school will improve traffic and pickup and drop-off areas and improve circulation for emergency responders. This also creates a pedestrian connection from Mill Street. Down at the bottom, there's a little winding beige road that leads you, and then you can get up to Mass Ave. So we're trying to create a lot of connection through the site that is very steep right now. So trying to make it more pervious to Mass Ave into the fields. We're also creating additional parking on the site, up to 227 spaces, which is more than is currently seen at the site, and creating a new toilet facility, the little gray box with the red outline near the stadium. That would be new toilets for that stadium. And that's it.
So the last part of this first segment of the presentation is a conversation about sustainability. One of our goals is to build a net zero facility, one that produces enough renewable energy to meet its annual energy consumption requirements. And to talk about this work we have done in this area, I'm going to call to the stage Ryan Katofsky, a member of our building committee, who is the chair of the sustainability subcommittee.
So good evening, everybody. As Mr. Thielman noted, our goal is to achieve a net zero energy building. I will start off by saying that that's actually a very aggressive target for a building of this size and for a site that we have that's constrained. I'll talk a little bit about what are called geothermal heat pumps in a few minutes. But we have limited space and where to put the wells, and that's a core technology for helping us achieve that net zero energy operation. But we've set it as a target, and we're designing to that target. We have energy modeling taking place right now, so we can start to get a sense of how close we're going to get to that. Another key element of our goals related to energy is to design for an all-electric building. Currently, the building is heated with natural gas. Our goal is to have a building that doesn't rely on fossil fuels. Also, as the grid gets cleaner over time, if you imagine the electricity we get every year, there's more and more renewables on the grid. Eventually, this building, whether it's a net zero energy building or not, has the potential to become a carbon neutral building because it won't use any fossil fuels. We're also looking to create a healthy indoor environment, for example, with lots of daylight. There were some pictures of light wells on some of those cross sections that you saw. And we're also starting to work on specifications for things like no and low VOC materials and finishes, paints, adhesives, and so on. And we're trying to do this and make this all an integral part of the design process that we're going through right now. So I'll talk a little bit as part of this. We've joined something called the Accelerate Performance Program. This is actually a pilot program with our two utilities. Eversource is our electricity provider, and National Grid is our natural gas provider. And what this does is it provides us with some free technical assistance and support related to this energy work. And they also queue up some additional financial incentives for us to help us get there. And in a nutshell, the goal of this program is to adopt aggressive but realistic energy use targets early in the design process. So that's why we're doing this energy modeling now. So we've set some targets for ourselves, and we're doing the modeling to see how close we can get to them. And this is measured basically by something called the EUI, which is the energy use intensity of the building. So if you measure that today, that's the total amount of energy that the building uses over the course of a year. Today, the current high school is at around 66,000 BTUs per square foot per year. And we've set a target for ourselves of somewhere between 30 and 40 for the new school. So it's a significant reduction in energy use, and that's what we're trying to hit. And if we get into that range of 30 to 40, that's what sets us up to become a net zero building if we can basically produce enough electricity on site to equal that energy use. And the other important goal of this program is to achieve this outcome with no or low incremental costs, and that's by doing this early in the process as opposed to later in the process. So how do you get there? How do you move towards a net zero energy design? So the first thing you do is you have a passive design. So you have a very efficient envelope, for example. So this is insulation, air infiltration. If you've done any work on your own home, my home was built in 1929. It's very leaky, so doing good air sealing is really important. So you can have all the insulation in the world, but if it's still a leaky house, you're gonna be losing out there. Windows, getting efficient windows. Those are all examples of building a building that has a passive design. We want to drive down both lighting loads and plug loads as much as we can. So as you can imagine, lighting loads have actually come down quite a bit with LED lighting. They're about half of what they used to be for buildings like this, so that's already getting low, but our architect is working really hard to drive that number down as much as possible. And then managing plug loads, so that's all the technology that we have is actually pushing that up. So coming up with strategies to manage plug loads, turning things off at night when they're not needed, that sort of thing. I talked about geothermal heat pumps a few minutes ago. This is a very efficient heating and cooling technology, so it's a single technology that does both. So if you have some of you might have air source heat pumps at home. Basically, air conditioners that run in reverse can be used for heating. And the idea here is to drill wells on site and use the ground as part of the system to do very efficient heating and cooling. We're going to have solar on the roof, of course. For those of you who don't know, we have solar on the roof of the high school now. We have about a 230 kilowatt array. And we're hoping, we're still working out the exact numbers, but we're hoping that we're going to have probably at least twice that on the new high school. We're also talking about managing the energy. The building is used for a lot of things after hours, so making sure that you set up the building so that it's really easy to shut down parts of the building that aren't being used, so that community ed can use parts, but that the other parts are not wasting energy while all that's going on. And we also want to design for ease of maintenance and low maintenance. So that's actually a lot that we're asking, but this is what we're driving towards now. I do want to mention one thing. I think some of you have probably seen this figure of $23 million that was allocated for sustainability. I think there's been a little bit of confusion about what that means. That was an estimate that was made early in the process for the geothermal heat pump system and for the rooftop solar. So it was done early. We wanted to make sure it was included in our initial estimates. And what we're doing now is to actually roll up our sleeves and do the more detailed work to refine those estimates. So for example, we'll need to drill some test wells to see what the soil is like, and that will determine how deep the wells need to be and how many there need to be, and that will be a determinant of ultimate cost. So that's what that number represents. All the other stuff I've been talking about is really part of the overall building design. So here's a picture. I just wanted to show you where we have solar on the school now. You can see it's not on all the roofs. It's only on part of the building because not all the roofs can take solar. Either they're not structurally capable, or they're lower parts of the building and they get shading from other parts of the building during the day. So our plan, as we build the first two wings on the front, in front of the current building, once those wings are completed, we're going to move the solar that you see onto those two wings. We think we can get all of it on there, and then when the second phases and the third phases proceed, we'll add additional solar on the roof of the additional wings. And we've started our conversations with the company that actually owns the panels. We do not own them ourselves. We lease them, or we basically buy the output. There's a lot of reasons why it's advantageous for public entities like schools to do that as opposed to owning it themselves. So we started conversations with them on all the coordination that has to happen so that we can, once we're ready, we can take them down and get them up as quickly as possible. And lastly, I will just talk a little bit about some of the other I'll call them sustainability features and goals that we have for the building. You just heard about the direct access to the Minuteman Bikeway. We're hoping that will encourage more people to bike. I walked here from the Heights, and there are a lot of hardcore cyclists out there now, a lot more than there used to be. And we're hoping that if we make access easier and provide some covered bicycle parking, that will encourage more people to bike to the school. I'm very interested in planning ahead for an electric vehicle future. I'm absolutely convinced that this is going to happen. So, like, for example, making sure that when we lay out the new parking lots that we have conduits for wiring. So when we decide we need to add electric vehicle charging, we don't have to dig up parking lots. We also have goals of diverting as much of the construction and demolition debris as possible from landfills. The state actually has some fairly strict rules about this. We're hoping we can get as high as 95% of that material to be reused in some fashion as opposed to being disposed of. So a minimum of 75%, but ideally more than that. We're looking into options to salvage and donate the old furniture. We're planning so that we can easily collect all the food waste that comes out of the cafeteria. This is something that's been going on in the schools in general. Obviously, the high school is where most of that comes from, being the largest school. And we've been working with the Arlington Public Schools has a sustainability coordinator that we've been working with to make sure that we're using best practices when designing those kinds of spaces to make that easy for the students. And obviously, we'll have low-flow water fixtures, and we've also been talking a little bit about the kind of landscaping that we're going to have that won't require irrigation. So that's not an exhaustive list, but I just want to give you a flavor of the kinds of things that we've been working on and will continue to work on as it relates to sustainability.
So we're going to stop here and take any questions you have about sustainability, the academic plan, the exterior design, and the site plan. No questions about finances. That's coming. We've got Adam coming up, the town manager. So if your question involves finances, we're not going to get to it. Yeah, go ahead, Annie.
So I got a couple questions about sustainability. So the first question is, do we know what the ROI is on going all electric with renewable energy? Like, do we know how much electricity the building uses now and how much the solar panels, et cetera, might provide in the new building? And is that being factored into how we are viewing the costs? And then the second question is, have we thought about solar roofing over the parking lot to get some more solar energy and keep those cars cool?
I'll answer the second question first, which is yes, we are thinking about a canopy for one of the parking lots. They are more expensive than putting rooftop systems because you have to build it's a beefier construction, and there's soil contamination throughout the site, so that would have to be factored into the cost. But it's something that we are looking at. In terms of the ROI, so right now we're looking at the upfront costs because that's part of the process that we're in, but there will be a life cycle analysis that's done later as we get into more of the details. Off the top of my head, I don't know how much electricity the building uses now. It is the largest account in town, not surprisingly, and if I had to take a guess, the current array probably provides, I would guess, maybe a quarter of what the school uses for electricity if I just had to take a guess. But we will be getting more into those details as we go on in the process.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Dr. Warden?
Thank you. My question is, why do you people think that actually parking is more important than children's athletics and open space? I should mention that I've had 5 children who've used for many years the athletic facilities at Arlington High School, and I have one grandson who, for the first time this year, has started to use the high school athletic facilities. If we have a huge jar of water and try pouring it into a small pipe quickly, what's going to happen? It's going to overflow, right? So next time, get a bigger pipe. Now consider when the Mill Brook is highest after torrential rain, then as it reaches the culvert at the Department of Public Works, the culvert pipe is too small, and the water overflows, it floods the DPW and its trucks, etc. So what is the solution that the building committee and the DPW recommend? That solution is just to take over the Arlington High School soccer field from the students and pave it over for DPW use. Don't bother doing the work to provide the long-term solution of improving and enlarging the culvert. Taking the student field is a lot easier. Likewise, structured parking as a long-term solution has not been properly considered. It is easier to just take more athletic areas from the students. The rear of Arlington High School is about 20 feet below the level of Massachusetts Avenue. So the Arlington High School area behind CVS could accommodate 2 or 3 levels of structured parking. But no, the building committee is not interested in that. It's easier just to take more athletic area from the students. As the Arlington High School campus is now, with its large front lawn, the student classrooms are sufficiently set back from Massachusetts Avenue that they can get away somewhat from the noise and air pollution of the avenue. The new plan pushes the student facilities out close to this noise and exhaust fumes. Students will not be able to get away from that unless they are in a completely sealed building. Maybe some town officials and some on the building committee are hoping to make the new Arlington High School building part of the so-called street wall, essentially an urban canyon with negligible open space that they are planning to build all along Massachusetts Avenue. Finally, the rear of the Arlington High School site, as mentioned, is 20 feet below Massachusetts Avenue level and shielded from noise by the large historic buildings. Traffic is minimal. It is very quiet and essentially an oasis of conditions that are perfect for student and community healthy athletics. Your plan is to take land there and remove the basketball court and the soccer field for town offices and DPW parking, and to build a new roadway. Your plan will destroy all of that ideal situation. You will be changing an idyllic situation, both front and rear of the high school, to a site that is no longer environmentally attractive or safe. Please just get on with fixing the culvert and with a better plan for Arlington High School, which will not hurt our children and not ruin the site. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if I heard a question there, but okay, thank you. Yep, go ahead.
Can you comment on any of the academic decisions that impact the design with regard to the new Minuteman High School that's being built and the timeline around that being relatively soon? Is there some interplay of like program and facility design that is taking that into account?
Sorry, I missed the question.
So the question is,
Give me the microphone, but I missed the question.
the question is whether or not the Minuteman project has just been completed, will be completed by the fall, and are we taking that into account programmatically as we design Arlington High School?
Yes. I mean, I think in terms of looking at the Arlington High School, we expect that students will go to Minuteman, but students currently go to Minuteman. When we're looking at our projections for enrollment, we consider that as an option, but we don't really know that there will be a significant shift either way.
And I guess
Do you want to speak to that, Dr. Bodie?
I wasn't sure that you were asking about enrollment as much as you were asking about programming. Programming and facilities. We are not offering the same programming that Minuteman does. Nothing is changed in that regard. We do have some programs that are vocational, such as our child study program that is linked to the preschool. None of that has changed. Are we increasing our education around technology and applications of technology? Yes. But Minuteman has the programming it has now. There has been some discussions with the high school down the road if there's any way that we can take advantage of some of their facilities, but there are issues of accessibility to those programs, but it's something that we still remain in communication about.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. So I think it's going to be our last question this segment, so we can get, yep.
Thank you. Jeff, earlier you showed a schematic up there about certain parts of the old high school, different years when certain things were done on it, completed, etc. An unusual question, but I feel I have to ask it anyway. Where this is going to be done in phases, the front part of the high school is going to be done first. Are the guarantees, warranties, whatever you want to call it, are they going to start on the completion of each section of the high school, or does the complete guarantee go with the building when it's completely done? So as if to say, the first two parts of the school up front, are they guaranteed from the day that they are completed, or when the whole finished project is done, does that when the guarantee starts?
I'm going to call on Jim Burrows from Skanska, our owner's project manager, to answer that.
Yeah, so typically the workmanship warranties will go for a year. Your long-term warranties all start at substantial completion of the full project. So substantial completion is the date of all your warranties.
When the whole thing is done, that's when the warranty for the whole thing starts?
Correct, correct.
Thank you.
Okay, we gotta move into the cost conversation right now. So I think if you didn't get a chance to ask your question about design, you can ask it later, but you can also include elements of cost. So let me talk about cost. Everyone on the building committee is mindful of our responsibility to construct a school that will serve the town for the next century, and our duty to consider the financial impact of the project on taxpayers. We have taken several critical steps to reduce costs, and Ryan talked about a few of those. First, we selected Alternative 3A, an all-new facility, because this was $25 million less expensive than renovating parts of Arlington High School and building an addition. Over the past several months, we have worked to maximize the funding we can receive from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. We are working towards LEED, or Leadership in Energy Environmental Design certification. We adopted a construction manager at risk approach to the project, and we have created a proactive maintenance budget to maintain our new facility. All of these cost-conscious decisions will make us eligible for more MSBA reimbursement. Our partnership with Accelerate Performance to achieve energy efficiency goals in the facility allows Arlington to receive more than $200,000 in future energy rebates. Finally, the committee has voted to move 3 town offices, the Comptroller, the Information Technology Office, and the Facilities Office, out of the AHS building, reducing project costs by approximately $7 million. During the past several weeks, our architectural firm, HMFH, has studied the feasibility of moving the school district offices and/or the Menotomy Preschool to the Parmenter School, which is located right here at the intersection of Irving and Academy Streets in Jason Heights. For many years, the school was the home of one of Arlington's elementary schools. In 1983, the town closed the Parmenter School because of declining enrollment. Since then, the town has leased the property to the Arlington Children's Center, known locally as ACC, a private preschool, and to the International School, which moved out of the facility last year. In 2010, the school committee transferred ownership of Parmenter to the Select Board. The Arlington Children's Center currently has a lease for space in the building through 2024. The building committee has weighed several options relative to Parmenter, all of which require approval of the building's owners, the Select Board. These options are: move the Menotomy Preschool to Parmenter on a temporary basis during the construction of Arlington High School. Menotomy would occupy the space recently vacated by the International School and not displace ACC. Move the Menotomy Preschool to Parmenter permanently, which means requesting that the Select Board immediately commence a process to terminate the town's lease with the Arlington Children's Center. In this scenario, the cost of constructing a permanent home for Menotomy Preschool would be separate from the MSBA project and would require a separate debt exclusion question on the June ballot. And the third option is moving the district offices to Parmenter on a permanent basis, placing them in space once used by the International School. Moving the Parmenter to the Menotomy Preschool permanently has many challenges. First, Menotomy would have to occupy the entire Parmenter facility. The classrooms in the Parmenter, however, are not large enough to meet the standards of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, or DESE, for public preschools. As a result, there would have to be an expensive gut and retrofit of the building. In addition, using the entire Parmenter building means the Menotomy Preschool, which is pressured by increasing enrollment like all schools in town, would have one less classroom than it would have if the school remained in the new Arlington High School. A permanent move, of course, would displace the Arlington Children's Center. If ACC was unable to find a home, there would be fewer preschool slots in Arlington. Furthermore, as enrollment grows in our town, we may find ourselves in a position in which we want to use some of the space in the Parmenter. That option would be eliminated if we were to move the Parmenter, if we moved Menotomy permanently to the Parmenter. There are advantages to moving Menotomy Preschool to Parmenter on a temporary basis, however. The budget for the Arlington High School project includes funds for a move while construction is taking place. and upgrades to the Parmenter building, including adding an elevator, replacing the furnace, and making electrical improvements, will make the building more attractive to future tenants. Keeping monotony in the new high school assures the community that we will maintain at least the same number of preschool slots in town that we have today. More importantly, we believe we are eligible for MSBA reimbursement for the cost of constructing the preschool at Arlington High School because the preschool serves children with special education needs. We would not be eligible for MSBA reimbursement if we moved the monotony preschool to Parmenter. Let me talk about the district offices and a potential move to Parmenter. Keeping the district offices at the high school makes sense programmatically and is less expensive than retrofitting the Parmenter for our administrators. Also, if enrollment at Arlington High School peaks substantially beyond the design number for an extended period of years, future town and school leaders will have the option of moving the district offices out of AHS and using that space for educational purposes. We want to be very clear about the financial trade-offs of this decision. Therefore, we will continue to look at the Parmenter question at the January 22nd Building Committee meeting and make a final decision at that time. I want to note that we have not found other alternative spaces in town for the district offices or the preschool. So many people in town have rightly asked questions about how the Arlington High School project compares to other school building projects in Massachusetts. And all of us want to understand how much our property taxes will increase and when they will increase. To answer all of these questions, I am going to call on our town manager, Adam Chapdelaine, and Adam will speak to the value engineering process we are undertaking and upcoming steps in the MSBA process, as well as the cost comparisons and the impact on us taxpayers.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me? All right. Jeff didn't mention that I was going to be talking about this, but I will. I want to dig in a little bit deeper on the status of the non-high school spaces and where we have decided to relocate them. So as Jeff mentioned, we have decided to move the comptroller out of the high school, and we have space in Town Hall. We are working on a configuration actually right up the hall in the assessor's office to move the comptroller staff here to Town Hall, which makes a lot of sense operationally. We'll have our entire finance department here located in Town Hall in one building. So it's actually, it's optimal that we are able to move the comptroller here as part of this project. Furthermore, we have decided that we can move both facilities and information technology to the renovated DPW facility. Again, it's probably optimal to move facilities to Public Works. There's a lot of crossover and synergy between the two operations, sharing of shop space and tools, as well as just having coordination between the two directors makes a lot of sense moving facilities over to DPW. And giving IT one comprehensive space where David Good can have his entire team under one roof at the DPW yard makes a lot of sense. So those three are being moved out of this project, and as Jeff mentioned on a prior slide, that should ultimately reduce the price tag of the high school project by approximately $6 to $7 million. The spaces that are still currently being programmed in the high school and still under discussion are payroll, school district administration, the preschool as mentioned, as well as community education. I also want to talk a little bit about some of the other evaluation we've done. We've heard in the community questions about the central school and what further we could do at Town Hall. Jeff obviously talked about the Parmenter. Here at Town Hall, we do have some space that could be made available as part of the renovation of the central school. We're undergoing next year a large renovation of the central school to modernize and make more space available for the senior center. To accomplish that, we'll be moving Health and Human Services offices from the ground floor to the second floor, and as part of that, we'll be moving the Veteran Service Officer's office on the third floor of Town Hall to the central school. So that'll free up a little bit of space in Town Hall that we can continue to have conversations about regarding potentially payroll or perhaps some other smaller use that's in the high school right now. Beyond that, looking at the central school, because of the renovation that we are attempting to move forward with, and actually will be before town meeting this spring for the senior center, and that move of Health and Human Services to the second floor, there really is no available space at the central school for any of the uses that we've talked about tonight. Certainly not enough space for district administration or the monotony preschool based on the large footprint that's required for both of those uses. Go to the next slide, please. Moving forward to talk a little bit about value engineering and the preparations we've done in terms of cost cutting. One important point to make is, and this was stated, I believe, at the last forum, but it's a critical point for anybody who's concerned that this project could balloon beyond the current price tag that's being talked about at $308 million. It cannot. We have put that number forward to MSBA, and they will not allow the number to go any larger than $308 million. So we're going out to a cost estimation process very shortly, and the building committee will be hearing back from Skanska and HMFH about their reconciled cost estimates on January 29th. If those cost estimates come back higher than $308 million, there will be cuts that will need to be made to get down to $308 million. And school administration and the school committee are going to provide a prioritization of the square footage reductions or programmatic reductions that we would have to look at to get down to 308 or below that $308 million number. So next slide, please. So Jeff also mentioned there's been a lot of talk at prior forums and within the community about how this project stacks up against other projects. And we spent a lot of time trying to put together an apples-to-apples comparison of similar projects in the region, in the state, to show a real comparison where we stand on a construction cost per square foot as well as a project cost per pupil. So what you see on the screen behind me is our project, $308,573 a square foot, and a project cost per pupil of $175,657. Now, as we go across the sheet, what we've done is taken Waltham, Belmont, Saugus, and Somerville, and we've applied escalation costs, basically the amount of money related to the project and industry increases in the cost of construction year over year to create an apples-to-apples comparison. So as you look across the sheet, Waltham actually just submitted their numbers, so we don't have their construction cost per square foot yet, but you can see on a per pupil cost basis, when we have normalized the data across these projects, the Arlington project is far more comparable or competitive with these other projects than some of the prior comparisons that have been shared at prior forums. And it's worthy to note that in the Arlington project, even with the removal of the comptroller, facilities, and IT, the Arlington project would still have 42,000 square feet of not specific high school space. Waltham, we don't know that number yet. Belmont would only have 12,000 square feet of non-high school space. Saugus has 0 square feet of non-high school space. And Somerville only has 2,400 square feet of non-high school space. So I certainly understand that no matter where we build it, the taxpayers have to pay for it. But in terms of how this project stacks up to comparable projects, I think this apples-to-apples analysis shows that this project fares better in comparison with those that are up on the screen. Next slide, to dig in a little bit to cost escalation, just to show it in a different way. Looking at cost escalation is a really important way for us to understand how we stack up against other projects. And again, pointing to the last forum, there was mention made of the much talked about Newton North High School project. So that was completed in 2010. If you escalate just their construction cost along the timeline of our project, that project would have been a $371 million project. So just the idea of simply stating that the Arlington High School project is more costly than the Newton North project is not an accurate statement. Again, apples to apples, it'd be a far more costly project than what we're contemplating. And then I provided some other numbers here just as points of comparison. Our own Thompson School, completed in 2013, construction cost of $15 million. Just escalating it to our timeline nearly doubles the cost of that project. Gibbs School, you can see, completed very recently. If you escalate it, still a large cost increase, as well as the Minuteman High School, being built for approximately 600 students, a construction cost of $121 million. If you escalated it to our timeline, much larger price tag of $186 million. So what does that mean for us? If you take our updated tax assessments, our updated property tax assessments, and calculate the $308 million project, and also look at what we assume our reimbursement rate will be and what will be reimbursable from the MSBA, the tax rate impact would be $1.11 in terms of the tax rate. So you can see behind me what that means for varying levels of property assessment. What you see behind me is the actual average property assessment or median property value for each of those types of property. So you see condo, single family, two family, three family. So you can see the range of impacts based on what your property is currently valued at. In terms of when that actual dollar amount would hit your tax bill, we haven't got to the point of design where we've had a cash flow analysis from our owner's project manager, but we won't borrow the money until we need the money, and we won't need the money until we're in the construction process. So even if this was to pass this June as a debt exclusion, we wouldn't really start borrowing large amounts of money until we went into construction in 2020, and then there would likely be several tranches of debt issued over the course of the construction project. So this likely wouldn't hit your tax bill in full until the later part of 2023 or 2024, until, again, it was fully hitting your tax rate or your tax bill. And then finally, talk a little bit about the next steps. I mentioned a little bit about this earlier. HMFH and Skanska will be receiving their cost estimates back several weeks from now. They'll compare their estimates for the project, and they'll reconcile any differences by the high school building committee meeting on January 29th. And that's when the committee will see them for the first time. If the revised cost of the project is more than $308 million, which is the number that the MSBA board approved, the building committee will need to reduce the square foot of the building. That really is the primary way to reduce costs, is by making a building smaller. If the cost of the building is below $308 million, the building committee may still seek to lower costs further and will ask for direction from the district leadership and the school committee on reductions that can be made in program space at the new high school. The school committee, superintendent, and high school principal are meeting on Wednesday, January 30th to discuss space reductions. On January 31st, the building committee will meet again, weigh the costs and benefits of reducing program spaces based on the priorities of the school department, and take a final vote on the cost of the project. Going beyond that, once all of those decisions are made, we will submit our proposed project scope and budget to the MSBA in early February. And we expect that the MSBA will hear that at their board meeting in April. Following an MSBA board vote, the town then has 120 days to get approval from the taxpayers to finance the new school. There are two parts to the approval process. The voters have to approve a debt exclusion, which is likely to take place in June. The select board has actually discussed the date of June 8th for that election. And town meeting has to approve the expenditure of town funds for the project. The debt exclusion requires a majority vote of the voters for approval, and the expenditure of funds requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting. The select board has had discussions about holding the debt exclusion vote on June 8th to give ample time for the public to learn more about the project. In addition, the select board has discussed placing a separate operating override question on the June ballot as well. If the debt exclusion vote is successful, we will further refine the design of the building and use the 2019-2020 school year to finalize the phasing schedule for the project. Construction should begin as soon as school ends in June of 2020. In January of 2022, the new auditorium and STEAM wing will be done, allowing students to move into those facilities while parts of the old high school are torn down and replaced by new construction. The entire project will be completed by the fall of 2024, with a final punch list done by June of 2025. So with that, I think Jeff's going to close it up.
So some have suggested waiting a year or more to hold a town vote and build the school. This is not possible given the timeline we have agreed to with the state of Massachusetts. We have, as Adam said, 120 days following MSBA approval to gain town approval for the project. If we do not secure approval from the town's voters in town meeting, we will forfeit approximately $100 million in state assistance for a new high school. If the vote fails, our town will have to do what we did in 1981, make improvements and additions to the school with our own funds. We will need to do this to maintain accreditation and to provide our students and with the facilities they deserve. A no vote will result in a facility that is below state standards and not on par with neighboring communities. It is not a wise option. It's a terrible thing to do to our young people, and it does not meet the future educational needs of our students. Such a decision will have a negative impact on everyone in town. We urge you to stay engaged with the building committee and this process in the coming weeks and months so you can learn as much as you can about this important project. The Arlington High School building website has tons of information about the project, including a growing list of frequently asked questions with detailed answers. You'll find meeting minutes, designs, reports, photos, videos, blogs, and much more. This is an historic moment for our town. We have a chance to change Arlington for the better, a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create the best high school for our students. Working together as friends, neighbors, classmates, and community, we can make this school happen. Every member of the building committee is concerned about costs. A new high school represents a huge investment in our community, and it requires a major commitment by taxpayers that will stretch many of our budgets. The committee will continue to look for ways to lessen the burden for the town and for individual taxpayers. But we must move forward and build the high school right by staying true to the education plan and vision, which calls for a 21st century building that meets the needs of future leaders. The time to build is right now. We have the promise of assistance from the MSBA, saving the town's taxpayers millions of dollars. Money we will lose if we dither or delay. If we build this high school now and do it in a way that makes us all proud, years from today, everyone living in town this June will look back on 2019 as the year we made the historic choice to build the best high school possible for Arlington. Our legacy will be the thousands of young people who will graduate from the new Arlington High School in the next 50 to 100 years, with the skills and the confidence to create a new, a better, and a more perfect society. This new high school and those who graduate from it can change Arlington and can change the world. And that is why all of us in this room and throughout our town need to come together to support this project. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen tonight, and now we'll open the forum to your questions. Chris. Yes, finances. Now finances. Now is finances. No, I called on you. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks, Jeff. Can you go back to the slide the town manager showed, which he described as a good apples-to-apples comparison?
Yes.
That one. Okay, thanks. I have a very different perspective. I would say that's an excellent example of cherry picking. And if anyone disagrees with me, I suggest they go to the MSBA website and look at the cost summary. Because in fact, this high school is currently the third most expensive on a cost per square foot basis of any of those listed in the MSBA, on the MSBA website under cost summaries for high schools. So I just want to make that point. Also, I think people need to understand that the construction cost per square foot is not the total cost by any means, and the total cost will be up around $740 to $750 a square foot. So if you could go up a couple additional slides, I think people seem to be confusing those two things. If you could go, I think, one or two slides forward where the town manager was showing the cost escalation. Sorry, one back. Yeah, it looks like the Thompson School and the Gibbs School have increased considerably. The Gibbs School going from 19 million to 29 million. Those are two different cost numbers there. The soft costs are included as part of the total cost. That's not, they're not in the construction cost. So it's extremely misleading to try to show this as cost escalation when you have two different types of costs involved: construction cost and total cost, including the soft cost. So I'm really disappointed that anyone would even show a slide like this. But let me go on, because one of the comparisons. Okay. No, they can come back to it.
Okay. So
I'll let them consult and they can come back.
So do you want to? So the question, Adam.
Yeah, get anyone from Skanska. You can answer this. What's the difference between construction cost, total cost, soft cost, plus construction cost?
So
isn't the difference between total cost, as shown here, and construction cost, the soft cost, or are there additional costs that differentiate the two? No, it's not
Okay,
escalation.
okay.
Let's
Chris,
talk-
you had a long time, so you got the mic. So Adam's
Yeah.
going to speak, then you're going to pass the mic to someone else.
Well, I
Someone
had a
else
couple
turn.
more questions, if I could.
That's it. Thank you, though. We appreciate it. We do. Go ahead.
So to be clear and to be fair, you're right that soft costs are part of any project. But to be clear and to be fair, that's entitled to construction cost. We're not misleading anybody. We are talking about construction cost. That's construction cost inflated by construction inflation or escalation to what the construction cost would be along the timeline of the high school project.
Exactly.
Soft costs, please let me finish.
Go ahead.
Soft costs are not escalated by the same escalation rate, if at all, as compared to construction. We're creating apples to apples by talking about construction cost to construction cost. That's what these charts are showing.
Chris, other people get to ask questions
Yeah,
now.
could
but
you
thank
explain the third column, please? Because you didn't answer my question. What is in the third column?
The third column, you included soft costs in the third, but not the middle? No.
Is it not the construction cost plus the soft cost, please?
I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. In that final column, the soft costs were added in. So if you wanted total project to total project, it would be, for Thompson, it would be 20 to 30, and then for Gibbs, it would be 27 to 29, still showing escalation.
Can we agree that the second and third columns are not comparable?
They're not comparable columns. One is construction cost.
Thank you.
Okay.
So am I done? Am I cut off now?
Chris, we got to let other people talk. Everybody gets a chance.
Okay,
now.
I understand. You want to control the conversation.
But
Go
no,
ahead.
you send a lot of emails to us. We answer them with great detail. But we're...
Jeff, I just think a point of information.
Yeah.
The $308 million that we're comparing this to in Arlington includes the soft costs. Am I correct?
Right. Yes, it does.
So I think that's the point we're trying to make, and that the column on the right is the construction cost with escalation plus soft costs, which would be an accurate comparison to the $308 million figure that we're talking about. So that's the apples to apples that Town Manager Chapdelain's talking about.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying. Okay. Okay. Miss Leary, go ahead. Mr. Peluso, you go next, and then we'll go.
Hi. On a different note, my name is Kate Leary. I was part of the Build Arlington's Future campaign in 2016. I am here to announce that campaign is reactivating. Okay, sure. In anticipation of the 2 ballot questions in June, and we're going to need a lot of help. We'll need volunteers. The campaign, to be clear, will be supporting a yes vote to secure funding to build a new Arlington High School. It will also support a yes vote for an operating override to ensure that our town services, including public safety, public works, and education, will be adequately funded. We have a lot of details still to work out as a community. That's why we've showed up at this forum tonight. And everyone here knows that this is a lot to ask of Arlington residents, so we'll need to do a lot of education and outreach ahead of that vote. I'm looking forward to working with many of you in the next few months. For now, for tonight, we're just asking for email addresses so that we can share updates and opportunities to help with the campaign. You can give us that information by going to buildarlingtonsfuture.org, or a couple of us will be standing in the lobby with clipboards at the end. And that's it. I guess my question is, can you help, and can we have your email address, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Carl? Carl? Carl, your turn.
Thank you. Is that on? Yeah. I'm Carl Wagner. I'm a town meeting member. And I wanted to ask, first of all, before I ask my question, how many of you here had not been to one of these forums since August, just by show of hands? So it's good to see there are some new people. And can I ask, by show of hands, how many of you are broadly supportive of the project that the building committee has put forward? Great. So I'm not, but I am going to try and speak positively before I ask my question and give you some things that I think are worth continuing to ask the building committee about. And that is, I wasn't able to speak in the earlier portion, but I wanted to point out that as far as I know, there has not been a full traffic study done of the traffic changes that will be required by this project. And that means two-way, two-lane roads going through to Mill Street and probably to Grove Street. All the front traffic of the school is going to the back. The front of the school, for vehicle purposes, will cease to exist. It will be a back, and all the traffic will go down to Mill Street and Grove Street. And I think people who live in Arlington Center or traffic in Arlington Center during morning and afternoon school commute times need and deserve a proper study. I'd also like to add that some of the trees were supposedly to be saved in the front on Mass Ave, where the parking will go, by the way, for the fire lane, so there'll be no parking in front of the school. But some of the trees were to be saved. But it's pretty clear to the people I've talked to in sustainability and environmental engineering that they will probably die from the work that the geothermal is going to have going in. So I ask you to commit to not killing the trees that you've said you'll save with the work that geothermal in front will ask. Also, I'd like to point out for people here that HMFH Architects is not the one who completed Gibbs. Gibbs was done really well. HMFH, in my opinion, is not an architecture firm that has much experience doing a building that Arlington would normally receive. So you're going to get a building that looks like Thompson, and that's okay because they've chosen it and you've supported it broadly. But I don't believe HMFH has LEED Platinum status, and that means, even though it doesn't mean too much to me, gold, silver, all that stuff, it means to the people that have been talking about this in Arlington who are architects that HMFH does not really have a lot of experience going forward with net zero and the things that we all want, a lower energy school. The final point I would make about the school is that it's great to go for electricity, but as you probably know, Pilgrim plant down in Plymouth is about to be decommissioned, and our electricity rates are going to go incredibly high very soon, 2019, 2020. So a school that doesn't have a backup plan beyond electricity is really a concern for the people who are paying the bills for the electricity. I know it's going to have 400 kilowatts on top, but just in case, having a backup plan other than electricity would be great. And I would like to ask the question, will you commit to a full energy study, net zero-wise, and will you commit to a full traffic study vis-a-vis the road you're building behind the high school?
Okay, so we'll take the trees, the electricity, and the energy, and Ryan will take that.
So I'll start with the trees, I guess. So we haven't fully laid out the geothermal well field yet, but the preliminary diagrams that we've done, sort of looking at a worst case scenario where we needed, I don't remember what the number was, but it was probably on the order of 400 wells. They're 6-inch wells. We're staying probably about, I'm guessing about 40 feet or more. And I'm imagine a 20-foot radius around each 6-inch well, because that's how they need to be spaced apart so they'll work properly. So the edge of that 40-foot, of that 20-foot sort of circle around the wells is going to be probably about 40 feet away from the curb. So there's plenty of room between where the wells are going to be and where the trees are. And we specifically laid out that preliminary diagram so that we'd be far enough back from Mass Ave. So, but again, we haven't finalized, and part of that is because of the equipment that you need to bring in can't interfere with the canopy of the trees, so you actually really can't get all that close with the drilling equipment. So that was the first, and again, we haven't laid out the well field yet. We don't know exactly how many we need. We may not need any in the front. We're not sure.
No electricity. We might not have enough electricity.
I'm not going to, I can't make forecasts about what our electricity prices are going to be in 2 years. The town does a pretty good job at procuring electricity on the competitive market. We work with a broker. They go out to bid at different times of the year, and I think, if there's an expectation that there might be a shortfall, because of a nuclear plant closing, I think that would be a discussion we would have with our broker and work about the timing of procuring the electricity for town facilities. But electricity prices go up and down. There's new supply coming on all the time. You can, if you look at the wholesale markets in New England, so the entire New England region operates as a single electricity grid, and that's how prices are set. Those prices go up, they go down. They're actually measuring now, there's enough renewable energy on the system, both small distributed and other projects in the region, that they're actually seeing overall demand regionally is not really changing all that much because that continues to come online. But I think that's something we would look at the appropriate time. I don't know if you want to add anything on electricity procurement.
Well, okay, electricity.
Can I add and then I'll go into traffic? Is that okay?
Yeah, well, the other question that Carl asked was, are we going to commit to a full net zero energy study?
So we're doing the energy modeling as we speak. We have one of the team members as part of the HMFH design team has specific expertise in net zero energy design and modeling, and they are working on that as we speak.
Yeah.
One more quick point on the electricity pricing. We did actually just, as Ryan mentioned, working with our broker, lock in our electricity costs for the next several years. So there, at least in the short term, won't be any spikes based on the contracts that we've locked into. Additionally, looking at their long-term forecasts, and they're just that, they're forecasts. They don't show any spiking related to Pilgrim, but it is something we'll certainly keep our eyes on. And in relation to the traffic study, so a full traffic study on site has been performed. However, after review with the architects, the traffic engineer hired by the architects, and the Transportation Advisory Committee, they asked us to commit to a study of the Millbrook corridor, as that has an adjacency to the site, as you mentioned, and we have committed to doing that. So, yes.
Okay, in the back, yes.
Hi, my name is Ganit. I'm a new town member this year, and I have a question. If the town will vote against this proposal, how much it will cost us?
So we would have to, we have already certified to the New England Association of Schools and Colleges that we can't renovate the existing school because it's too small. So we've kind of crossed the Rubicon there, and we then face accreditation visit, and we would have to come up with a plan as a town to fund a substantial reconstruction of that site with our own money, without state money. That's what we would have to do. And so there would be a group that would meet and talk that through and figure out how to finance it and do it without state money. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I would urge you to try to find a way to get the cost down before it goes any further. Down to $250. No, you won't get there, but please work that way. When this originally came about in 2014-15, the numbers that were floating around were 80 to 120 million, possibly 150 million. And well, we're not anywhere near that now. And the point is, I think the lid came off the other day when people got their tax bills. People saw increases of 10 to 15% on their taxes for this quarter, and we haven't had the override yet. And they're up in arms about that as it is, and now they're thinking, well, we've got an override coming up. Didn't I pay it with this one? No, it's going to be another one like that, and then with the debt exclusion and so forth. You've got a lot of people in town that are upset right now with the condition of the finances, and I think any effort to get it down under to make it look like you're doing somebody a favor. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, sir, the blue shirt. And then, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, really. Hi, my name is Matt Reck. I was just curious, there was a comment earlier about the timing of when we would borrow the money and how that, could you give us a little more detail about what that means to when we would actually see real changes to tax bills? Does it get phased in small steps, or is there one large step that happens when we take out the big mortgage? Or can you explain how that timing works, please?
Sure. So I can explain it as we don't have detail on the cash flow yet because final phasing and design's not done. So I can't be entirely specific. But the idea of it happening in stages is what will occur. So whether or not it's 2, 3, or 4 tranches is yet to be determined. But We will borrow a small amount for design work as compared to the total cost if the debt exclusion is approved in June. So there'll be some initial amount that would hit tax bills, probably not the end of this year, but next. And then as construction started, there would be another tranche, and then again, probably a third or fourth tranche. So over the course or duration of the project, we'd be working with both the construction side to understand the cash needs, as well as our financial advisors who help us when we go out to borrow to make sure that we're going to receive the most advantageous rates. My guess would be smaller to start, probably a good-sized to really get the project going, and then 2 smaller ones beyond that.
Okay, yes. You know, woman, I'm going to call enough women. Yes.
What got reported in the paper was $800 per year per residence for 30 years. So yeah. I'm still wrapping my arms around the 30 years. How long is this building going to be in existence? And really, are we going to ever stop paying that $800?
So well, the last building, the high school, the first building of the high school was built in 1914, and this building is designed for 50 to 100 years. And so we're designing a building for at least 50 years, and the town has a history of keeping its high school buildings for longer than that.
Can I add a little bit to that?
And then Adam wants to add more, yeah.
So when we talk about debt exclusions, I try to compare it to a mortgage. So the town will effectively borrow a large, combined large sum of money and amortize that cost over 30 years. So as the town pays its mortgage on the high school, those mortgage payments are then paid for by each individual taxpayer. But once the debt's paid off after 30 years, then the payments do in fact stop. So they don't go on beyond that 30-year period.
Okay, yes, and then, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Steve Revelak, 111 Sunnyside Avenue. During, at a few points throughout this process, I've heard the term loss of accreditation brought up a few times. And this applies to if we were not to go ahead and fund the high school. I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about what loss of accreditation means and what are the possibilities of that scenario if the project were not to be funded. Thank you.
So I've served on some of those committees professionally, and if a school usually go from warning to probation to loss of accreditation, and the impact is generally on students. And so if 2 students were applying for a financial aid package, a university could say, well, we have a choice between giving the financial aid application or a scholarship to someone who comes from an accredited school versus an unaccredited school or a school on probation or warning. In addition, colleges can say, well, we've got 2 qualified candidates, 2 equally qualified candidates, one from Arlington High School, which is not accredited. This often happens at more of the elite competitive colleges, less so at that's at that level. And so a student would be impacted. It could negatively impact the student's application. I don't know, Kathy, am I missing anything else that could happen in that? But those are usually the impact of accreditation is it forces the town to take some action if you lose accreditation, and it negatively impacts those who are applying for college. That's usually where the most impact occurs. Yeah, back.
Laura Notman, Arlington Heights resident. I'm the parent of a junior in high school right now, and just to speak to that question a little bit, whether or not we have an accreditation, right now we have a school that is not really accessible and doesn't necessarily serve all the students, and it's imperative that we go ahead with this process. And I want to commend the whole team because I think this process has been really open, and I appreciate the communication. The question I have for you is, we need to do this and we need to pay for it, but I'm also really concerned about the costs to citizens here who are on fixed income or limited income, many of whom are my valued neighbors. And is there anything that the town is considering and working on in terms of how to make the tax changes equitable or to shield those people for whom it will be too much of a burden?
Yeah, Adam, take that. Thank you.
So I can share with you, or anybody from the committee or the assessor's office can share with you the programs that are already in place for seniors, those who are disabled, veterans. There's various exemptions and also a tax deferral program if you meet certain income limits. However, those programs admittedly only can go so far. So we are looking at bringing before town meeting this year a program that I believe Concord and Sudbury have adopted several years ago, which would actually create a circuit breaker program for local property taxes, which would put a cap on the amount of local property taxes that qualifying people have to pay. The major difference in that program from every other program we do is what they don't pay gets redistributed across the rest of the town. So it's a little bit of a different approach to property taxes than what we do now, but that is sort of the bigger, better thing that we're going to look at adopting this spring at town meeting.
Yes.
Thanks. My name is Jean Clark, and obviously cost is a concern, but in trying to find the apples to apples and comparable projects, were there other communities where a high school was built on a site that spanned a cliff, like 20 to 30 foot difference, sites where there was a brook running underneath it, sites where there was a history of contamination in the soils? These are things that we have to contend with at this site that make it very different than you would have in other communities. I can think of the ones they put on the board, and I've been to those high schools, and some of them are flat areas where there were not things built there prior. So we're dealing with a very different situation here. As a side note, I graduated from there in '91, and my father graduated from there in '54, and I can say that when I went in there recently, I don't even think they had really painted since I graduated. So, I mean, like, nothing looked different. And I can't imagine, like, I just can't imagine not doing this project. So, and I don't know if there's another opportunity to speak to things like design or elements like that. I get that there's an emotional attachment to a building, and I'm not sure I want to go there, but I don't really like that idea of adding wood columns to a semi-modern structure, and it just seems inherently going to create a lot of problems in terms of erosion and maintenance. That's one comment. The other comment is I have a child who has significant sensory issues, so when they do design the central spine and other areas that are large like that, I hope they take into consideration things like noise and spatial sensory-related things. Those are my questions and comments. Oh, yeah, so is there another school out there that had similar? That's my question, because we had to ask a question, right?
So I guess I would say, and Jim can jump in, those that we compared ourselves to, we tried to look at comparability on a number of levels. The only one that it doesn't have a brook running under it, as far as I know, but has similar challenges or similar complexity as the Somerville project. Belmont certainly doesn't. That's a new school, flat site. I know less about what Waltham and Saugus's specificity is, but Somerville's probably the one, maybe even a tighter site than we have with complications like we're facing.
Do you want to talk about the sensory? I mean, Matt can talk about that.
On the issue around sensory issues and kids coming in, I just want to say I agree, right? I think the design of the building, I know it will be large when you come in, but the idea is actually to make that to be an open space that won't be noisy and clouded and cluttered, and to have it so students don't need to be going down sort of long, noisy hallways. When they go into the academic wings, they'll be right there in a little neighborhood, and there's not a pass-through, so those will be quiet spaces. And then in the central spine, it's programmed so that there are quiet spaces where different types of students who have different needs for different kinds of spaces can go into those. So if you look at the cafeteria space, there's a central part that's high ceiling, but there's a low ceiling section off to the side where there'll be quiet spaces. And then the idea of having all of the support functions sort of near the central spine is to make it so that it's, what we like to say is centrally located but discreetly accessed. So that kids who want to sort of go into quieter spaces, right now programs like our REACH program or our Summit program, they're hard to squeeze in, but we've tried to put them in places that are easy to get to. So those features are really central to the theory of the school.
Grant?
This is quick questions to Principal Janger, because we don't really vote no here. We're not voting for the status quo. We're voting to take action in different directions. You, in that one board meeting, had the prints for the last high school up there, the 1970s version. And you spoke about the number that the town went to the mattresses to avoid, the $19 million investment. But then you quoted what we did spend on it, the renovations that had to come afterwards. What did we spend on the renovations after we said no to $19 million?
So I'm not an historian, and I cannot cite this as a person who's supposed to cite, but I have been told by many that the final price was $24 million.
Okay, thank you. On the end, there was a question, sir? Yeah. And then I'll get to you, Alan. Yeah.
I have two questions. The first being, in the $308 million figure, what is the current, I know that's just an initial estimate because you're going to be doing more cost estimating, but what is the contingency that's there? And the second question has to do with the geothermal plan. I know that there's a history of contamination on the site, and the contamination, at least at that time, was mobile. And I'm wondering if geothermal and all the drilling that has to take place is impacted by the fact that the contamination plume is probably still mobile.
Okay, thank you. So there's a question about the contingency cost, and then there's a question for, I think, for Ryan about the question is to what extent, how are we taking into account the contamination below the soil when we do the geothermal work?
So I won't have a complete answer for you, to be honest. They've started to do some sampling to see what the contamination looks like. It's not, like to your point, it's not uniform across the site. It will be in the first so many feet of the site, and then below that there is no contamination. These wells might be several hundred feet deep. So I think I know they were drilling some additional wells, not wells, but they were doing some sampling more for the foundations and other things, but they were looking at what kind of contamination was coming up as they were doing some of this probing, I think, over the holidays. So we're going to get more detail from the folks who really know how this works. When the wells are completed, however, this is a closed-loop system. So it's not like we're injecting fluids into the soil and then drawing fluids out through these wells. So if that's what you think of when you think of a well, what we're really doing is drilling a hole and then sticking a tube in it. So this whole system will be closed loop. So once the drilling is complete, I don't anticipate that that's going to change what's going on underneath.
Okay, then the contingency question.
Sure. So we are carrying both a construction contingency and an owner's contingency. The construction contingency is 6% of construction cost or estimated construction cost, so that's approximately $17 million. And the owner's contingency right now is 3%, and that's approximately $8.5 million. As we go through estimation over the course of the next few weeks and gain more confidence in what the costs will actually be, we will talk about considering reducing those contingency figures.
Alan? And then I'll get.
Thank you. I've got a simple question about a small number. I think we've agreed to move some of the town departments out of the project for a saving of $6 million. And then later we see $308 million. Should that be $302 million? Or where's the $6 million? Where do we see the $6 million savings?
Adam, we're very reluctant to put out any new numbers until HMFH and Skanska reconcile everything.
I'll make a general suggestion that when we're doing value engineering and we find a way to save money, whether it's moving departments out or whatever, let's reduce the $308 million. I think everybody would be happy to see that starting to go down. So,
okay,
just a suggestion.
All right,
but I'd like it 302 anyway for saving $6 million.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Yes, Susan. Thank you. That's a good suggestion.
Thank you. Susan Stamps, I'm on the tree committee, and regarding Carl's remarks about worrying about the huge majestic trees on the property which will remain in the project, I would like a commitment from you, Jeff, or from someone that the trees remaining on the property will be properly protected during the construction, and that the tree warden will be consulted and will approve the plans for protecting the critical root zones.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can make a promise that
Can-
the tree, but
I mean, we have a history in this town
Yeah.
of killing trees during projects. It hasn't happened a lot, but it has happened a few times. That was before we had a tree warden who could look at a plan and say, here's what you need to do. So I'm just asking that you
well,
consult
why
with the tree
don't we
warden.
answer it this way? Why don't we have someone from the team talk about the steps we'll take to protect the trees?
Well, I would also like our Arlington tree warden to be consulted on the
Well,
project.
that will happen. Okay, that
Okay.
happens. That's part of
Good.
that's part of the whole process. But do you want to talk about the?
So tree protection can certainly be part of the specifications when we go out to bid for the project, and I can commit that we'll make sure that the tree warden is around the table as those specifications are being put together.
Okay. Yes, you asked a question before I didn't call you. Go ahead.
I was glad to hear Larry Slotnick, Precinct 7. I was heartened to hear our architectural representative say that when it comes to the exterior design, that designs B and C, some of those features might be attempted to be incorporated into design A. I'm hoping that you take input from the principal and faculty and students about the town's surveys results to go with Design A. Because I think Design A could have an impact on the amount of natural light that gets into that central spine and overall change kind of the livability of that very important part of the new building.
Thank you, Larry. Yes.
Hi, my name is Jenna Beltram. I'm in East Arlington, and I think it would help a lot with your marketing strategy when you're displaying the 308 to remind people that the 308, part of that MSBA is paying for if we pass this override. So the 308 doesn't come out of your pockets. The state's going to pay some of it. Whereas if we repeat what we did in the past with the 1970s, 1980, where we didn't pass the override, and looking at the 19 million versus 24 million in long-term costs, that this 308 could turn into 350 out of our town's pocket, no state funding. So I think when you're showing the numbers, just as a kind of ticket shock, to maybe make that clear and maybe do a little marketing with showing we can do this now, and if we don't do this now, this is what we might be looking at in the future.
Thank you. That's a good. Thank you. That's a good suggestion, Ted. Mr. Peluso, Dr. Peluso.
I have two questions. They're really yes or no questions.
Okay.
And then I have two others. If my memory serves me, I'll be able to ask them. I read somewhere that the Massachusetts School Board Authority actually audits some of the numbers. So accordingly, some independent organization, the way I understand it, is looking at the numbers that they're going to reimburse. So if you guys decide to do some silly stuff with the money, you ain't going to see the money from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Accordingly, you got somebody looking over your shoulder besides the 100 people here, or whatever that number is. Okay? Now, am I right in that?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Okay. And just to, I know you wanted a yes or no answer, but to clarify, there's the architectural firm does their cost estimation. The owner's project manager does cost estimation. The state does cost estimation. And then we have people on the school committee, the building committee, the town manager that are doing cost estimations to check things too. So there's a lot of...
I understand that, but you have a state agency looking over your shoulder.
Yes, yes.
That's for sure, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The second one is the $824. If I understood what Adam said a few minutes ago, you ain't going to see that in your tax bill until approximately 2025. You're going to see a little bit of it going up year after year after year. So when you throw around the $825 increase for a single-family home, or the $450 for a two-family home, each of the two families, you're talking a number that is going to be reflective fully in 2025.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. So we're talking about 2025 increase in taxes.
Totally.
At least the
Completely,
full amount.
Right.
Right. So it's going up a little bit at a time. Third question. Do you think if we had an uncredited high school, you think it might affect the value of the homes in Arlington where people want to come in and buy?
I think it would, yeah.
You bet your life. An uncredited, whatever that means, uncredentialed high school, people buy a house, they buy because they have kids and they want to give them educations. And lo and behold, when they ask, the real estate agent says, well, we're not accredited. That's great. Oh, yeah, well, I'll make a slightly smaller offer. Last question. Do you think the tax, I'm sorry, not the tax rates, the interest rates on municipal debt have a pretty good chance of going up over the next few years? I'm going to tell you, you may not know this, but I will tell you this. If you asked me, I would bet a lot of money that what you're going to write a bond for, assuming everybody approves it, and whatever interest rate you're going to pay on that, will be substantially lower than it would be in 2024 if we said, let's go back to the drawing board. So think about that. There's interest too.
All right. Thank you very much. That's helpful. Yes, in the back. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Carrie Finnison. I have an 8th grader who will be going to Arlington High School, as I know you do, Jeff.
I do.
And I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit about what it will be like to live through this project as a high school student.
I'll talk a little bit about it and let the principal, but you know, the first thing I want the community to understand is, and I want students to understand, you know, students say, well, we get a semester off. No, everything continues, education continues, everybody goes to school, everyone has to take all their classes, and the plan calls for if everything goes, if the vote is approved, in January of 2022, so when our children are in their second semester of their junior year, they'll move into the STEAM wing on the front of the facility, and they'll be in, the new auditorium will be done, and they'll still have access to some parts of the building while construction takes place. And there have been steps in planning regarding safety, student safety, and how students are going to get into the building. And Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about that, or?
So you have an 8th grader, you haven't been in the building yet? It won't be worse. No, sorry. The honest truth, I think Jeff was pretty on target about it. The nice thing about the current plan, really part of what sold me on the current plan, is that construction starts the summer after next, and it's taking place out on the lawn. We'll move the front entrance to the back, but other than that, life as usual will continue in the school. It will continue to be a little bit run down. It will continue to be something that we have to work around, but it won't be any really different than what we're dealing with now. There will be some noise on the front, but we will work around that. We've been working with construction, so we've gotten a little bit of practice over the last 2 years as they've done the wells and some of the things, getting our communications down. At the current freshmen will, if we are lucky and all have things on time, get their musical in the spring of their senior year in the new theater, and we'll be moving into all the new science labs, math labs, arts. A lot of the really neat new spaces are going to be occupied in only about 3 years. And then it'll be a couple more years after that when we move into the language wing, and so we will have then we'll be building around the construction site. But actually, after we move into the new site, we're going to have a lot of extra space. So I think we'll have a lot of flexibility to do things. And then 2 years after that, we'll move into the humanities wing. And then in the next few years, we'll move into the remaining PE wing and then finish the fields out in the back. We'll make it work. Our teachers are resilient and our kids are resilient.
Thank you for that question. Yes, Annie, you already answered, so go ahead, yeah.
Hi, just two quick questions for clarification. On the Parmenter School, I'm not understanding why it can be temporarily used without moving ACC out, but it cannot permanently be used, so if you could just clarify that. And then, because I know nothing about all this state involvement, if you were to get a no vote, can you not reapply to the state to get funds a second time? You can't just start the process over again. I mean, I know that's a delay, but just can you explain the timing on that as an option? Thank you.
Do you want to talk about the MSBA? So I'll take the Parmenter question. So on a temporary basis, the idea would be to move the Menominee preschool to the section of the Parmenter school that is not being used. There's undersized classrooms there, and the students that attend the school for a period of years will have to be in that facility. The superintendent will talk to the state to make sure we get a waiver. We're okay. And I think we will, because we're going to prove that it's temporary space, and we're building a nicer and bigger space for the students in the short term, in a few years. So that's how that works. We will not displace ACC. Where the international school was, will occupy that entire facility. We've got to spend money to upgrade that, as I indicated. Now, the defeat, if we lose.
So it would, I would imagine, some of this is what my assumption would be, and some of it is fact. I would imagine the MSBA, if there was a no vote, would give us a chance, within that 120-day window, or maybe even within a slight extension, to try again at the ballot. Something not entirely similar, but not dissimilar from what Minuteman went through, with some lengthy extensions to their opportunity to go get funding. If we weren't able to get it then, we would have to then start the process all over again and file an SOI. So that's fact. We would have to do that. And then back to opinion, I would imagine the MSBA would be very hesitant to accept us back into the process immediately. So it took us 2 submissions of SOIs to get in this time. So I think better part of a 4-year period to get accepted, and then another 4 years to get where we are right now. So my assumption would be, if we didn't get funding, we would probably be looking at another half decade to decade before we got back in the pipeline. Yes, you just said Lincoln never got back in, so that's...
Yeah, so the town of Lincoln lost their vote, and they never got back into the process, and so that's the precedent here. Yes, sir.
Greg Christiana. I have 2 kids in the public schools, 1st grade and 4th grade. So they're among some of the first students who'd be taking advantage of this new school when it's built, my daughter anyway. So as far as the campaign that Kate mentioned earlier, obviously if you're a true believer in this project, you should volunteer for the campaign, as Kate suggested. But I'd also suggest that if you have questions and suggestions for this effort, but you're generally supportive of this effort, you should also definitely volunteer for the campaign, because I'll tell you what, you'll learn more detail about the project and the details and the costs and all the thought that went into this by being part of the campaign, right? That's, in my experience, like Kate and I and several of you here who I recognize worked on the last debt exclusion campaign, you are like up to your eyeballs in all the details. So if you really want to get into the details of the project and feel like you're really part of it, you should join the campaign and make it successful. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, person in the back, and then Annie, this will be second time, I think. But go ahead. Yep, go ahead. In the back, sir.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Jamie Raccanelli. My question is if you can talk about the features you're including in the design to allow for fluctuations in enrollment to make the school able to absorb more students or to adapt in periods where enrollment may decline.
So, Matt, do you want to talk about that?
So, if you look at the building right now, the build size is 1,755. So what that sets is the number of homerooms at 85% capacity. And the reason why they do it for 85% capacity is because if you've ever tried to schedule something, if you're at 100% capacity, you actually can't schedule anything because there's no place to move anything to. If you go from 18, so when we went through the planning process for every single one of the functions, we looked at the 10-year number, which at the time was 1855, and to make sure that we could make things work within that size amount. In addition, if you look at the design of the building, one of the things that Mr. Thielman has talked about was the fact that we have the district offices. So when if you get out beyond, right now the demographers have the line flattening out. But if it does turn out to continue to go up, the district offices are there as a space you can build out into in terms of additional classroom space. And then there's also, I believe, a space off the end which is designed so additional classrooms can be built off there. The problem you run into in a building of this size, though, is you can't suddenly enlarge the cafeteria, enlarge the theater, or enlarge some of those central spaces. So it's not that we've built an oversized or an outsized library space or cafeteria, but the cafeteria is designed so that the central spine and some of those areas are also usable for overflow space. The library space was designed to have a little bit of additional flexibility. We would lose some functionality, but we'd be able to function in there. So our expectation is that we can get pretty far out, and we've had this conversation a number of times. We really tried hard to get it right. It's also really expensive if we build for 200 kids that don't show up, because that's a sunk cost that's never coming back. So we can add on, but we have some flexibility really for the foreseeable future.
Annie, and then Steve.
So Adam, did I hear you correctly that you believe the increase in the tax rate to cover the debt exclusion will be $1.11 per $1,000 of value?
Correct, yes.
So the way to figure out your tax burden for this project is to take your assessed value and multiply it by $1.11. That's the increase in your bill per year at the point where we have borrowed the last tranche.
Correct. But take the first, either divide it by 1,000 or take the first 3 digits of your assessment and multiply it by, or first 4 digits of your assessment and multiply it by 111.
So on my $645,000 assessment, I'm looking at something south of $700.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Steve, you had a question in the back? I did go a second time, so Chris, you get to go a second time.
Thank you. Steve DeCourcy. Thank you, Jeff. First of all, I want to just comment on commend the committee on the planning for, there was a question earlier about what will happen with students during construction. I was a sophomore at the high school during the last renovation, and the wood gym had 12 classrooms in it, no roof, and all it took was one teacher's class, one classroom to get out of control, to get the whole gymnasium out of control. With a timed construction the way you have it here, with the new construction, it's not ideal, but it's a good educational process as the students are going through it. My question I have just on the breakdown between reimbursement and the town share. I'm wondering, Adam, if you could share with us right now what the assumption is and what opportunities there may be to maximize the reimbursement above what's there right now.
So right now, the amount that we're being reimbursed for the feasibility study is 45.11%. As we move forward, and I think Jeff touched on some of these, by by going for lead status, we can get an incentive point, 1 point, 2 points. 2 incentive points for lead status, 1 incentive point for construction manager at risk. So we could get up, north of 48 percentage points in reimbursement. The critical piece of that, though, is there's that top line reimbursement rate, and then there's what our actual effective reimbursement rate is, because there's a square footage cap on the amount that the MSBA will reimburse in terms of a square footage number, as well as items that are reimbursable and not reimbursable. So we're looking at that 48% number or thereabouts for our reimbursement rate, but we are running analyses that look at anything ranging from 37 to 33% for our effective reimbursement rate based on what's actually reimbursed. So when we look at that $100 million figure, we're talking about that effective, basically 33 to 35% reimbursement rate.
All right, Chris, second time. I called on Annie, so Annie, this one's on you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, just to follow on that last question. Excuse me? Oh, okay. I didn't realize people had to state their name, but I will. I'm happy to do that. I'm Chris Loretti, former town meeting member. On the reimbursement rate, I thought the reimbursement on the total amount was closer to about 31%, but I'm not going to quibble with the town manager on that. I'm just curious how that compares to other towns based on the total reimbursement percentage, and also what is the total expected amount of the debt exclusion, and how does that compare to other debt exclusions for high schools in the state?
Jim, I mean, do you want to take it, Adam, or the effective rate, or what's the range in reimbursements by the MSBA for projects in the state?
Yeah, it's anywhere from 20% up to 70%, but again, just giving a rough range. They look at the economic status of each district, and that's how they apply the reimbursement rate.
And then the second part of Chris's question was, Adam can take that.
So right now, based on the analysis we're using, we're looking at it's somewhere between about 210, 211 million. We're looking at the town share, with the balance being coming from the state. But there's the MSBA has a form called the 3011 that we use to continue to update our assumptions. And when we get cost estimation back, we'll continue to update those. We'll get more clarity once we go before the MSBA on exactly what's reimbursable and what's not. And we'll figure out, is it 31 effective, 33, 35? We'll figure out exactly what it might be.
Okay, so we said we would end this at 9 o'clock. If you have additional questions, you can approach people over here and ask those questions. I want to thank everyone for coming. We meet next on the 22nd. Come on by. Thank you.